Hi, Right Riders. Thank you so much for joining Cruise today. I appreciate you joining me in this second video that we're going to be looking at on tone in poetry, which is why you see the title Example 2. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see a poem called For Doom by Georgia Douglas Johnson. And then on the right side of the screen, you will see a Google Doc where I started to have the definition here in front of you. It is the same exact definition that you see in Tone in Poetry, example 1, because I wanted to make sure we had continuity between both videos. So in this case, we are, to review the definition of tone, we are looking at writer, narrator, character. And we're looking at the attitude that they have about what they are saying on their topic. When we're looking at tone, we want to ensure that we do not insert ourselves in the poem. Because when we do that, what we're essentially doing is inserting our personal opinion on the topic. But that is not what we're looking at. When we're thinking about tone, we're looking at how the writer feels about the topic, or how the narrator feels about the topic, or how the character feels about the topic. And then the next question students have many times is, well, I don't know how they feel about the topic. How am I supposed to figure that out? Well, how you figure it out is by looking at the word choice that the writer uses, because essentially, or that the narrator uses, or that the character uses, because essentially that's all we have as readers. All we have are the choices of words that the writer, the narrator, the character chooses to use within the text. And therefore, that's why I prefer to zoom out and think about tone in terms of, does the writer, narrator, or character have a negative tone? Do they have a neutral tone, meaning they are neither positive nor negative? Or do they use a more positive tone about the topic? In this particular video, we're going to be looking at how negative tone is used. Thank you to the Poetry Foundation for always providing amazing poems for us to dissect here on this channel. For Doom by Georgia Douglas Johnson. Her life was dwarfed and wed to blight. Her very days were shades of night. Her every dream was born entombed. Her soul a bud that never bloomed. And final reading. For Doom by Georgia Douglas Johnson. Her life was dwarfed and wed to blight. Her very days were shades of night. Her every dream was born entombed. Her soul a bud that never bloomed. The first thing that we want to look at really is the title and the tone connection. I've definitely given you a hint at the beginning of the video, letting you know we're looking at this idea of negative tone. And now we're going to prove this tone really by looking at not just the title, but actually looking at the evidence in the text and looking specifically at the word choice that we're seeing. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with the red pen here, and we're going to look at some words that are parts of words that definitely demonstrate negative tone. So I want you to think about the word doom. When you think of doom, do you think positive, negative, or neutral? And if you're thinking negative, we are on the same page. You might have heard the term doom and gloom together. So doom and gloom both have negative connotations, negative word choice. Therefore, I know that when I see the word doom, I immediately think negative. Then I see words like dwarfed, and I see words like blight. So when I see words like when something is dwarfed, when your life is dwarfed, that means it is getting smaller. And so positive or negative word choice here? Definitely negative. When you see the word blight, Do you feel that that word is positive, has a positive connotation or a negative connotation? Now, this is one of those words where when you're in middle school, you might say to yourself, well, Cruz, I don't know what that word means. And so because we do not have a long poem, I encourage you, look up the word blight. And if you look up the word blight, you will find that this word is in fact negative. So negative connotation on this one. And when you're thinking about the word, and maybe you think wed, and so when you're wedded to something, a wedding, that means you're tied to it for life. So in this case, even this whole, line one of this one stanza poem, her life was dwarfed and wed to blight. So if you're married to blight and you figure out and you determine what blight means, you will see how this definitely has, again, a negative connotation associated to it. So we've got dwarfed and blight. And then we see her very days were shades of night. Now, you might think to yourself, well, I love the nighttime and I think it's beautiful out at night. And I might agree with you. I love walking and seeing the stars and the moonlight. However, notice the juxtaposition. By that, I mean the positioning of the word days and night together. Her very days were shades of night. And so in this case, it's really comparing this idea of days and comparing the idea, the brightness of a beautiful day were actually shades of nighttime. And so in this case, again, we're seeing this idea of a negative connotation, a negativity, negative tone. Notice how we are not inserting ourselves. Again, if you, like me, love the night, love to walk at night, feel that it's calm and beautiful at night, that is one interpretation, but that's not what Georgia Douglas Johnson is saying. What she's saying is her, using third person, her very days were shades of night. So for this particular character in this poem, this character is experiencing daytime, which are actually shades of night. And so again, negative connotation. Her every dream was born entombed. So if you are in a tomb, it means you are enclosed in something. You are in some sort of casket, in a grave of sorts. Again, notice this word choice, negative connotation, this idea of entombed, negative. And then we end with, and again, her every dream was born entombed. So this idea that her dreams are enclosed, they are locked up. This is negative again. And then we have this final line, and really it's the end of the poem. The whole poem is in fact one line filled with commas, but this is technically line 4 of the poem. Her soul a bud that never bloomed. So this, imagine yourself being, being compared, your soul being compared to a flower, and a flower that never had the chance to bloom. Positive, neutral, or negative? Absolutely. This demonstrates negative. And so this entire poem is really just, and you're feeling so sorry for this character, for this person within this poem, because again, it's written in third person. We have her, and her. And so you definitely get this negative tone throughout the entire piece. And so there is no doubt that Georgia Douglas Johnson wrote this poem using a negative tone And we will start to unpack it even further in this stanza as we begin to find the text evidence in the poem. I set myself up for success by having the link to the poem. I set myself up for success by having the title of the poem, For Doom. And then I set myself up for success by, again, having the poet's name. And now we're going to start to look into the text evidence. And so because we only have one stanza, so we can sort of set ourselves up here by saying, okay, we've got only one stanza, and now we can go line by line and looking at in line one, what do we see? And so in this case, we can maybe bring in this idea of using ellipses and saying, in determining this text evidence here, that life for life, and then I can say maybe her life was dwarfed, and then we can use ellipses and then add in wed to blight, and then bring in these ellipses again, and then close the quotation. And looking at the next line, and then I'll expand this a little bit, and then that way we can shrink that. And then we're looking at line 2 in this poem, in line 2, and then having her very days, and then I can use the ellipses and then say shades of night. Line 3, in this case, I can add her. And notice how when I'm pulling the text evidence, right, writers, that again, I'm following the capitalization utilized by Georgia Douglas Johnson. Her every dream, born entombed. And notice again how I'm using ellipses to let the reader know that there's more there, but I chose to select certain words. And then her soul, a bud, and then never bloomed. I have my text evidence now, right, writers, and we can even add in a little bit of this idea of for doom in thinking about the title. We also have this idea of the title and this, the word choice of doom. And I'm going to add that in there and include this idea of when you think of F-O-R-E, so F-O-R-E can be used as in thinking about words like before. So before something happens. So like our forefathers, and again, just giving a very simple example here, forefathers are our fathers who came before us. But for can also be thinking forward and thinking of for example, like foreground, and that could be the ground that is in front of us. And so not before, but actually in front of. So when you're thinking about an image and you're thinking about, let's say, a drawing, well, the foreground is that which is closest to us or nearest to us or at the front. So, you can think of for as far as front of the viewer. So for could be that which came before us or that which is in front of us. So just sort of keep that in mind as we think of this idea of for doom, because in all reality, when we're looking at her poem, she uses, Georgia Douglas Johnson, the writer, the poet, uses past tense. So we've got was dwarfed, were shades, was born, never bloomed, and we have entombed, ed. So this is written from a past as if it had already happened. So just some ideas to think about, right, writers, as we really go into depth in this poem in creating our middle school and then analyzing the text evidence for our high school paragraph. So we've got a lot of information. We've got our poem. We've got everything we need. So now we can say goodbye to our poem and now stick with one screen, our Google Doc, and start to really unpack what we have. And I'm going to go back to our previous poem from Carl Sandburg that we used for tone and start to use some of that as my model for my next paragraph. So in this case, we're looking at Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem. And again, we want to use what we've used in the past because I want to, again, make sure that I have some continuity, but also to demonstrate, right, writers, that, you're allowed to use other writings that you've done to enhance or to use it as a template or as a guide for you when you're writing paragraphs. So Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem, For Doom, now in this case, we're not shifting really tone. There's no doubt that she has a negative tone. In this case, I'm going to say uses a negative tone. And I'm going to say that because it's a negative tone that is demonstrated throughout the poem. And now I want to make sure that I give the reader a definition of tone. So again, just sort of using what was used before in a previous video. So tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter or topic and/or topic. And it's interesting to think about that, what in fact is our topic with this idea of for doom. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And then I'm going to add this idea of narrator's reveal attitude through word choice. And now I'm going to reference Johnson's here. In Johnson's work, she reveals a negative tone throughout the entire work. We have Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem For Doom uses a negative tone. Tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter and/or topic. Narrators reveal attitude through word choice. In Johnson's work, she reveals a negative tone throughout the entire work. And maybe I'm going, because I've already said negative tone, I'm going to say she reveals negativity throughout the entire work. And so now I want to bring in the text evidence to prove what I mean. And again, what's interesting is that we never get, the title is For Doom. And then we've got this idea of life and days and dreams and her soul. And so what in fact is the topic? When you're thinking about this, right, writers, what is the topic? Doom? I mean, if the author, the poet, reveals the title through the topic through the title, then the topic essentially is a doom that has already been come before, a doom that is in front of the reader, or in front of the person who's in this poem, because again, this is written in third person. So if we're thinking about this idea of before and in front of, so again, it's a very interesting play on words. So we're going to go into that a little bit, especially in our high school paragraph, and thinking about analyzing the why. And so now I've moved my text evidence so I can use it in this poem, in this particular paragraph, rather. So in thinking about in Johnson's work, she reveals negativity through the entire work. For instance, or for example, in line 1, the reader is introduced an unknown woman whose, for example, in lines 1 and 2, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose life was dwarfed, wed to blight, and whose very days shades of night. Let's take it from the top, right, writers. Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem For Doom uses a negative tone. Tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter and/or topic. Narrators reveal attitude through word choice. In Johnson's work, she reveals negativity throughout the entire work. Okay, I've got work and work in one sentence. In Johnson's poem, she reveals negativity throughout the entire work. For example, in lines 1 and 2, for example, in the poem, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman. For example, in the poem, and again, I'm arguing this in the entire work. So again, right, writers, I may be changing a couple of things here. For example, in the poem, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman. Who, and I think what I may end up doing is using this, setting us up for success by actually having it indented in this way, right, writers? And so what you're essentially letting the reader know is that you're using the entire work here. So you're using the piece, and we're going to set us up for success this way because I think it works better in doing this. And so that way we get a sense of the work itself. So we can set it up like this and ultimately open the quotation and then close it at the end. And this is letting the reader know that, again, this is a line, break, line, break. And so I think this would work better. For example, in the poem, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose life, and I don't want to say life again. So when we think about life, we can sort of say her existence, her being, again, we've got this idea of soul and life. And so this word existence is the first thing that popped into my head, right, writers? For example, in the poem, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems almost as if it's like, why even be born in this case? I mean, her life was dwarfed, wed to blight, her very days shades of night, her every dream born entombed, her soul a bud, and we know in the poem that Georgia Douglas Johnson says, her soul a bud that never bloomed. And so, we are introduced to a woman, for example, in the poem, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems, purposeless. I mean, really, has no purpose. And so if you're without purpose, it is an existence that is purposeless. It is a life that has no meaning. So the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems meaningless. And so we have this entire work basically represented in this paragraph. And now we can go into, right, writers, in our middle school paragraph, what we're talking about here. So I'm just bringing this a little bit over. So again, this lets the reader know that I'm using pretty much the entire poem. And when you start to use, again, more than one line like this, right, writers, you really want to offset it so that the reader is aware that you've gone, line to line. And so, what are we essentially saying here? I mean, no doubt we have words like dwarfed, blight, night, dream, entombed, bloomed. And so, even the title is connected. So let's go take it from the top here. Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem For Doom uses a negative tone. Tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter and or topic. Narrators reveal attitude through word choice. In Johnson's poem, she reveals negativity throughout the entire work. For example, in the poem, the reader is introduced, and maybe I don't need the poem again. For example, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems meaningless. By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloomed, Johnson almost forces the reader for the woman who is trapped in her poem. By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloom, Johnson almost forces the reader, and maybe forces is maybe a good word, but I just feel it's a little too strong. So Johnson almost forces the reader to feel sorry for the woman who is trapped in the poem. Or who feels sorry for the woman described in the poem. Again, going back to the top, right, writers, I saw some repetition, so I'm going to adjust that. Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem For Doom uses a negative tone. Tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter and or topic. Narrators reveal attitude through word choice. In Johnson's poem, and she reveals, and again, I've got this she. In Johnson's poem, negativity, and I was thinking of the word highlighted or negativity, lingers throughout the entire work. Negativity is shown throughout the entire work. Narrators reveal attitude through word choice. In Johnson's poem, negativity is shown throughout the entire work. For example, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems meaningless. By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloom, Johnson traps the reader, almost forces the reader to feel sorry for the woman described in the poem. Johnson, I'm going to change that, leaves the reader. Again, that was a strong word choice. And again, notice, right, writers, how I too am looking at my tone as I'm writing this paragraph. By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloomed, Johnson leaves the reader no choice but to feel sorry for the woman described in the poem. Yes, that I like, right, writers. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloomed, Johnson leaves the reader no choice but to feel sorry for the woman described in the poem. Even the title itself, even the title choice, For Doom, hints at a purposeless, hints at a life without purpose, or hints at the negativity. Hints at the negative connotation or the feeling associated with the word. Even the title choice, For Doom, hints at the negative connotation about to happen. Even the title choice, For Doom, hints at the negativity which is about to happen. In the poem or in the work. By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloomed, Johnson leaves the reader no choice but to feel sorry for the woman described in the poem. Even the title choice, For Doom, hints at the negativity, doom, hints at the negativity which is about to reveal itself in the work. All right. By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloomed, Johnson leaves the reader no choice but to feel sorry for the woman described in the poem. Even the title choice, For Doom, hints at the negativity, doom, which is about to reveal itself in the work. Therefore, Johnson, and we always want to come back full circle, right, writers? Johnson's poem, For Doom, uses a negative tone. Therefore, Johnson's poem. Now, because I just mentioned title For Doom in the previous sentence, I do not wish to repeat myself. So I'm just going to say, therefore, Johnson's poem uses let's go with this one. Therefore, Johnson uses Johnson's poem traps the reader in a negative work or a negative traps. Therefore, Johnson's poem traps the reader in a world of negativity. Or in a negative world. Let's go with that one, right, writers? Okay, let's take it from the top, middle schoolers. And so again, this middle school paragraph just sort of looks at really the word choice, and then we'll start to go into the whys, deeper analysis, and text evidence analysis for our high school paragraph. Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem For Doom uses a negative tone. Tone represents the writer's attitude about the subject matter and or topic. Narrators reveal attitude through word choice. In Johnson's poem, negativity is shown throughout the entire work. For example, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems meaningless. Her life was dwarfed, wed to blight, her very days shades of night, her every dream born entombed, her soul a bud never bloomed. By using words such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloomed, and phrases by using words and phrases such as dwarfed, blight, entombed, and never bloomed, Johnson leaves the reader no choice but to feel sorry for the woman described in the poem. Even the title choice, For Doom, hints at the negativity which is about to reveal itself in the work. Hints at the negativity, doom, which is about to reveal itself in the work. Therefore, Johnson's poem essentially traps the reader in a negative world. All right, writers, I am feeling pretty good about this particular middle school example. And so I'm going to shrink this just a little bit so you can see the work as a whole in the middle school paragraph. So here we've got the entire work by pretty much most of it by Georgia Douglas Johnson. And I'm just doing this for formatting purposes, and then I can put it up to a 90% here, right, writers? And so you can see how, again, we've used the work in this case to demonstrate this negative tone. And no doubt that this is a poem which reveals negative tone throughout the entire work. And now we're going to go into our high school paragraph. So I hope, again, this ensures your success, middle school students. And now we're going to shift it over and really looking at the why behind this particular poem and analyzing the text evidence for our high school writers. For those of you in high school or who wish to level up their writing and really determining the why. Why have this? So this idea of life dwarfed, wed to blight. So thinking about this, first of all, we sort of have this, it's almost like when you're looking at someone's entire life, you're really kind of zooming out into, again, your entire existence, zooming out at the character's existence, really. And this idea that you're married to something that you cannot escape. So if you're wed to blight, so you can't, you cannot divorce yourself from it. So you're married to something that you cannot escape. Married to something that the character cannot escape. And again, we know it's a she because the pronoun her is being used. And we know she's using third person. So married to something that the character cannot escape. And when we think of blight, again, we're thinking of blight meaning you're living sort of this life of poverty, of this existence, that you, it's in shambles, it's in chaos. And we've got, again, this, we know this is in third person because it's using her. And obviously we know it's a female character using this her. Her life was dwarfed. And then again, was dwarfed. So also using, we want to go deeper, right, writers? So this idea of past tense. So it's almost, and again, we've got past tense with was dwarfed, ed. And so past tense, so this is already, so it's almost like foredoomed. She's basically already dead. I mean, her life was dwarfed, wed to blight. And then the last poem, the last line of the poem, her soul a bud that never bloomed. So in this case, it's, and maybe I guess I'll wait till line 4, but she's already dead. So this character, and as macabre or as dark as this may seem, I mean, look at the title. The title is Foredoomed. So I tell you what, right, writers, I mean, this is about as dark as it gets when it comes to, analyzing a poem, this idea of negativity. And there's no doubt there's a reason that I chose this particular work to really demonstrate this, how a writer can, in fact, demonstrate tone. I mean, it's there. It's there for the taking. So in this next part, we've got this idea of her very days, shades of night. So here we have a comparison of days comparison, where days are being compared, where days seem like nighttime. So when it's supposed to be bright and beautiful and sunny outside, it is not. It is dark. I mean, do we have some depression or a depressed state? Maybe. We don't know. We don't have those words there. We can only infer based on what we are given. So a comparison where days seem like night. So there is no light in her days. Moving on to further text evidence, I'm going to move this down, right, writers, because we need the opportunity to see this on one full page here. Then we go on to, and again, this idea of third person, her, female character, past tense. I can include all of that in line 2. And then we've got her every dream born entombed. And so, again, this idea of, now we've not got a comparison. We've got this idea of dreams, that never have the opportunity to be expressed. They're trapped. So dreams are trapped. Dreams are trapped in a tomb. Dreams are, dreams cannot be fully realized. And again, this idea of third person, her, female character, past tense. And so, it's really this, a dreams cannot be fulfilled. And we stay in our third person, female character, past tense. And then we end with, right, writers, this idea of her soul a bud never bloomed. So in this case, I mean, here is really kind of this culmination, this end where it's just, this person has officially died. I mean, at this point, her soul, and we sort of, I think it's interesting how we zoom out again, because we have life and then we end with soul. So that's why I say that, this zooming out at the character's existence. And so it's almost like zooming out at the character's soul. And in this case, her soul never bloomed. And so, at this point, character, this third person, her, this female character, is dead, has died. And so, and nothing came of it. So nothing came of it. Her soul a bud that never bloomed. So soul being compared to a flower, a lifeless flower, a flower without petals, or again, because if you're in the bud, and even thinking about this idea of a bud, it's sort of trapped by, these, it's closed. And so even this whole idea of entombed, and, we're really, you get this sense of entrapment. So, so no petals, no petals. You're never allowed to be open. No petals, no openness. And ultimately, your life is completely, you're trapped. A trapped, closed life, existence, even. And so we've got so much here, right, writers, for our analysis for this poem. I mean, it is so rich in tone, in this negative tone. It's such a beautiful negative poem that you feel for this woman. You have this unbelievable empathy for the character in this poem, but it's still negative. And so, right, writers, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy and paste our middle school paragraph, because we definitely have enough text evidence here to really make an amazing piece for our high school upper level paragraph. Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem For Doom reveals a negative attitude, reveals a negative tone throughout the entire work. Tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter and or topic. In Johnson's poem, negativity is shown. Let's bring in the word choice. Reveals a negative tone throughout the entire work. Tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter and or topic. Narrators reveal that attitude through word choice. In Johnson's poem, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems meaningless. Her life was dwarfed, wed to blight. And then now we can go into her very days, shades of night, her every dream born entombed, her soul a bud never bloomed. So in line one, our female, just looking at this, her life was dwarfed, wed to blight. In line one, our female character lives in a world that she cannot escape. She is trapped in a poverty-stricken, empty life. She is trapped in a poverty-stricken, empty life. In line two, the negativity continues when the character's days are compared directly through a metaphor. When the character's days are compared to night, when the character's days are compared to night. Here, Johnson uses a direct metaphor. Meanwhile, line three, Johnson reveals that the woman's dreams cannot be fully realized. That reveals that the woman's dreams will never be fulfilled. Reveals that the woman's dreams will never be fulfilled. They will never be realized. And so in this case, again, I'm using a semicolon separating two complete sentences, right, writers? So I'm going to go back and we're going to sort of take it from the top and see, and really I'm going to take it from the top right here, right, writers, just so we can see what we have. In line one, our female character, in line one, the female character lives in a world that she cannot escape. She is trapped in a poverty-stricken, empty life. In line two, the negativity, I'm going to change that. The negativity continues In line 2, when the character's days are compared to night. Here, Johnson uses a direct metaphor to describe a world without light. Here, Johnson uses a direct metaphor to describe a world without light. Meanwhile, in line 3, Johnson reveals that the woman's dreams will remain unfulfilled, They will never be realized, will remain unfulfilled and unrealized. I want to use prefixes, right, writers? It really helps us to eliminate wordiness. Sometimes you'll hear the word wordiness, or if you are repeating yourself, you might hear the word redundant, or if you're repeating yourself and just using too many words to express yourself, it's also called verbose. So you can be wordy, you can be redundant, you can also be verbose. So that is not what you want in your writing. Meanwhile, in line 3, Johnson reveals that the woman's dreams will remain unfulfilled and unrealized. Yes, I like where this is going, right, writers? And then at the end is really it's almost like the climax, but it's the climax into like the gates of, almost you could say, the gates of hell. I mean, really, we just jump out into a pit with this character because we're basically, it's like, why was I even born? And that is really terrifying to think about. So meanwhile, in line 3, Johnson reveals that the woman's dreams remain, that the woman's dreams, that this woman's dreams will remain unfulfilled and unrealized. Indeed, in the final line of the poem, it is presented as if the female character has died. Indeed, in the final line of the poem, it is presented as if the female character has died. A direct metaphor, and again, her soul a bud that never bloomed. In this case, it is a direct metaphor. A direct metaphor is used to compare the woman's soul to a flower that never came to be. That never came to be. An unopened, caged life. I'm going to go with that. An unopened, caged life. And I'm going to use a colon to really create this dramatic pause, right, writers? A direct metaphor is used to compare the woman's soul to a flower that never came to be. An unopened, closed life. Let's go with that. All right, and then we're going to take what we wrote for the middle school paragraph, and I'm going to use that, the title choice here. So I'm gonna have that same ending that I used for my middle school because I really like that ending and thinking about coming full circle. Through the title For Doom, Johnson foreshadows what is to come. For the poem traps the reader, essentially for the poem traps the reader in her character's negative world. And now we will take it from the top, right, writers. Let's take a look. Georgia Douglas Johnson's poem For Doom reveals a negative tone throughout the entire work. Tone represents the narrator's attitude about the subject matter and or topic. Narrators reveal that attitude through word choice. In Johnson's poem, the reader is introduced to an unknown woman whose entire existence seems meaningless. Then we have the poem. In line 1, the female character lives in a world that she cannot escape. She is trapped in a poverty-stricken, empty life. The negativity continues in line 2 when the character's days are compared to night. Here, Johnson uses a direct metaphor to describe a world without light. Meanwhile, in line 3, Johnson reveals that this woman's dreams will remain unfulfilled and unrealized. Even the final line of the poem presents itself as if the female character has died. Even the final line of the poem presents itself as if the female character has died. A direct metaphor is used to compare the woman's soul to a flower that never came to be, an unopened, closed life. Through the title For Doom, Johnson foreshadowed what was to come. For the poem, I like that one better, speaking in past tense. Through the title For Doom, Johnson foreshadowed what was to come. For the poem, trapped the reader in her character's negative world. I really like that as a first draft, right, writers? And now I'm going to shrink this so you can really get a chance to see what this full paragraph looks like in looking at the upper level paragraph, right, writers, of this particular piece. So here we have the upper level paragraph of Georgia Douglas Johnson's work For Doom. And then here we have the text evidence. And then here we have the middle school paragraph of For Doom. And we have, again, an example of the middle school paragraph. And then if I bring in the high school paragraph, again, here it is, right, writers. Here's the final sort of piece. And if we looked at them together, you could really see what we've created here with this particular work, but I'm going to have to shrink this to like 20%. So I'm going to move this, Control C, backspace. I'm going to move this up so we can really see both works together. And then I'm going to move our text evidence way down here. Control V for all that work for Georgia Douglas Johnson's work. And I'm going to move this, and then I'm going to move this down. And I want to shrink this to tiny, tiny pieces so we can see it all. And here it is. So here is really both works revealed, so you can see what we've created. And I hate that I had to put this at 25%. But really, it's got to be at 25% so we can see the middle school paragraph ultimately and the upper level paragraph all here on one tiny, tiny page. So, right, writers, I hope this journey was worthy of your time. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. I appreciate you all sticking it out. And again, this was one of those amazing pieces that really needed that deconstruction. We needed to dissect it to reveal, to allow For Doom to bloom in its full glory. Of course, you probably picked up on Georgia Douglas Johnson's rhyme scheme as well. But in this case, we were really focused on tone. And I hope this experience was helpful, useful, and that you walk away with a better understanding of tone in writing. Thank you so much, Right Writers. Thank you to Georgia Douglas Johnson, her work For Doom, and Poetry Foundation. Take care. Bye-bye, Right Writers. Thank you.